What's up, guys? It's Chit Chat with Joshua. So today I'm just making this video, like sort of spontaneously, with regards to SPH, Singapore Press Holdings' decision to restructure their business as a non-profit. Um, so while I'm doing this, I'm actually feeling rather pleased with myself because I'd actually predicted this sort of activity in Singapore a couple of months ago. Like I expected similar outcome. Well, actually, I first expected the government to just pour a lot more money into um, SPH to keep them alive, despite the declining media industry. But, well, declaring yourself as a non-profit works as well, I guess. So I thought I'd just go into a little bit why I came up with this belief a couple of months ago. So the core reason behind this is because of the idea that I believe quite strongly that whatever happens in the Western world, whatever happens in America, as their society chooses to progress and get further into the get society further into current times, the sort of behavior or norms that become normalized there will ultimately come to traditional nations like Singapore, and then we have to choose what sort of actions we wish to take to ensure that the consequences are actually beneficial. So in America, for a couple of years now, the legacy media, so regardless on the left or right, there's CNN, Washington Post, Fox News, all of these news agencies, especially CNN, was traditionally considered, by me anyway, to be very reputable and trustable sources of information. Now, I never for a moment, thought that CNN could possibly release any fake news articles. But over the last few years, it's become increasingly clear that despite their reputation, these news agencies actually have released fake news or misinformation. And while there are instances where they issued corrections, where they took the responsibility and issued corrections, there's also a number of articles or stories which they let run and then simply allowed it to fade in the background without addressing that it's outright fake news. So the question is, why would such a reputable company like CNN actually go into the fake news industry? What's the benefit for them? So the reason I saw for this was that, well, we're in the 21st century, and we're in a technologically advanced society, right? So there's the rise of the internet, social media, independent journalism, citizen journalism, YouTube, Facebook. So with the rise of such a variety of sources of information, there's inevitably an increase in number of independent journalists and news sources that the public can consume. So to make the matter worse, with mainstream media or with the media market actually declining in market share, market size, and with an increased number of players in the market, well, the viewership and ultimately the revenue that the traditional legacy media companies generate from the viewership declines because viewers from their original base now get their news sources from a variety of other places. Like example, maybe Occupy Democrats, which is it's a left-leaning company which reduces a left-leaning organization which releases news in releases news articles with a left-leaning tint, or maybe the Daily Wire, which does the same thing with a right-leaning tint. So with these sort of media outlets available, the demand for traditional media or legacy media actually falls. So with a fall in revenue, the budget for high-quality journalism in these legacy media companies is actually slashed, right? Because fall in revenue, obviously there's less funds available for journalists. So it makes journalists actually more desperate, with less money, less time to spend on stories. So this increased fighting with between journalists in the legacy media and other companies, in a shrinking share of the media market, it's ultimately led to journalists in the legacy media being willing to take, in the legacy media and in independent journalism, willing to take any means necessary to secure a story, to secure the viewership, and ultimately secure the funds and revenue. So in America, this has come up as journalists in the sunset industry actually focusing on sensational, polarizing, clickbaity sort of news, so as to bolster their views and demand, because such news stories tend to be tend to be more eye-catching and intriguing to the public. So as it temporarily gains the attention of the public, it ultimately increases the viewership for the moment and increases the temporarily revenue. So after the legacy media saw that this sort of activity was working well, they took it up a notch. Instead of just overemphasizing or bending the truth, they chose to just go with outright lies. Because, well, a story which is sensational always sells, right? So, which is why there's some cases of legacy media which are traditionally trustable and reputable sources actually giving outright fake news or misinformation. So, but I think that this sort of activity is going to come back to bite the legacy media in the bum, to be less crude. So because the reason I think this is because as they push further and further to the radical extreme stories and they pump out these sort of stories which are sensational, well, the majority of citizens will just get tired of this divisive, sensational, polarizing, and well, just outright lies of stories. So with the trust and reputation of these legacy media companies being eroded, the demand for their programs and the viewership will decline, despite the stories becoming more sensational. So I think that will ultimately, this sort of strategy will ultimately run the legacy media into the ground in the foreseeable future. Now, when I saw this sort of activity occurring in America, I thought that similar activity could occur in Singapore. Singapore is certainly a technologically advanced society. The importance of SPH or Straits Times as a news source has declined over the years with the boom of independent journalism like Mothership and Today Online, and with social media at our fingertips, Facebook, Twitter at our fingertips, a variety of other articles with regards to current affairs is readily available. So I wasn't surprised that the demand for Straits Times articles would fall. But to make matters worse, right, other than the rise of independent journalism, there's also the fact that we're in the 21st century. The number of individuals who consume paperback newspapers is falling rapidly, and this trend is just going to continue to occur. The number of people who consume newspapers, traditional paperback newspapers, just going to fall as the old generation pass away. So with this decline in newspapers, which traditionally made up a substantial amount in terms of the company's revenue from advertising. In the past, some of us who remember this, or certainly the older people who remember that newspapers used to be filled with pages upon pages of advertisements at the back, where a variety of companies would pay a fee to media companies to be able to advertise their company for, say, a job posting. And this actually contributed a substantial amount of the income for these media companies. So with this loss in revenue, it ultimately, combined with the rise of independent journalism, I don't see traditional media companies surviving in our free market economy for another decade. This is why I was certain that the Singapore government would intervene and pour millions upon dollars into Straits Times to ensure their continued survival and to ensure that they would continue able to report objective news with regards to a variety of issues without taking a particular side or attempting to sensationalize it. This sort of activity is already occurring in countries like France and Australia, where the government is subsidizing their, where those countries actually subsidize their media to ensure its survival, despite it not being an example of allocative efficiency, I guess you could call it. You could see it as a waste of resources because the demand wasn't there, but it's kept alive for the sole reason to ensure objective journalism survives. So with these news media companies being allowed to continue to survive, as shown in Singapore, where SPH restructured themselves as a non-profit, it would allow the public to maintain their trust and belief in the news agencies, where Singapore is predominantly SPH, and ultimately in the government. And with the trust in the government, it allows the government to maintain power for extended period of time, allowing them to implement long-term visions, which will ultimately benefit Singaporeans. So I think it's a positive that Singapore took the preemptive action, that SPH took the preemptive action to prevent the sort of polarizing or sensational news stories that are pumped out by the legacy media in America. I think this is a positive and will ensure that our people, that Singaporeans actually remain united on a common set of core values, like such as the common set of traditional values, really, meritocracy, hard work, diligence, sort of thing, as opposed to being radically divided as seen in America. So yeah, that's about it with regards to this topic. Yeah, this was really just a spontaneous little video I made because I was feeling rather, pleased with myself that I managed to predict this. Because I really think that Western nations like America and Britain serve as a symbol or as a sign of what's to come to our traditional nations. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching this video. If you guys are actually more interested with regards to the policies or how SPH's restructuring of their business will affect shareholders, and there's a number of articles out there. I think Mothership released about 1 or 2 articles, so did CNN and Today Online. There's sufficient articles there to educate yourselves on that. But yeah, that's about it. So thank you guys again for watching this video. Hit the like and subscribe button below, and yeah, that's it for today. This is Chit Chat with Joshua.